However, in each lifetime, you're meant to evolve more, meaning moving closer to the light, as we call it. That's ascension. You thought of it in certain beings or ascended masters or certain people who have ascended, but you all do that. And then when you put that together collectively, you have a planet that will ascend. And you're in this period now where globally that has not taken over, which is why we've been given our work to get more people to understand that if you each come together and collectively decide you raise your individual consciousness and then bring that together collectively, you're creating a boomerang of energy, so to speak, that will uplift your world. And you all can do it when you believe that you can.
Welcome to a Broaderlenspodcast.
Roger, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Listen, I'm really happy to be here because you're going to ask me some great questions that I want to have out in the world. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for watching. I really appreciate you guys. Before we get into a conversation, because they might think you're cray-cray if they never heard your story before. How do you invite people just to listen and be open-minded? Any words?
That is the one thing. I'm glad you said that because that's the thing that didn't allow me before to bring stuff forward because I said, oh no, people aren't going to understand this. This is going to be a little bit strange until we understand or kind of accept that we're all consciousness and we just access it in different ways. That's all. That's what we do as we live. So that's what we'll talk about how all that happened.
Awesome. Thank you. You're the author of Overcoming Fear, which is your book's right in the background, which we'll get into in a little bit. But maybe you can give us a little background of how you were brought up, like what religion or were you raised with the religion or not? I know in your book you talk about being a Christian Scientist, and many may not know what that is. So maybe you can give us a better understanding.
That was my beginning stages of life, being a Christian Scientist, which was so different than most things that were out. I mean, this was, everybody know, full disclosure, I'm 73. So when I was first growing up, this religion had been around for a long time, but it was not widespread. There was not a lot of people using it. Even some people said it's a cult. That's what people said about it, because the religion said that everything is mind, everything is consciousness. And so when we're out of balance in our bodies physically or anything like that, then it's an error, is what it's called. It's an error in our thinking. And that, of course, made no sense to me as a kid, but I studied it and I went to Sunday school. That's what we did every single week. And my grandmother on my mother's side was a devout Christian Scientist, and her sisters as well. And I would see her every morning sitting down and studying her books. There were two books that everyone they would study. It's called Science and Health. It was a textbook. And then it was a companion to the Bible, so that they would study both together. And the point was to come to this higher state of understanding. And of course, as a kid, I knew nothing of what that was, except when I knew I was different. Because when we would go to school, we would have exemptions for inoculations, so to speak, because it was against our religion. That was the kind of thing. But then that also felt like a stigma to me because it was so different than all my other kids and friends. And then as a result of that, I'm thinking I should be able to do this. My grandmother, I would see her studying every single day. I never saw her sick. I can remember one day in my life where I saw her in bed with a cold or something. Other than that, she was always just healthy. And I'm getting every single illness and disease and physical problem imaginable. And I remember asking her a question, why does this happen to me? And you're so okay. And she says, well, you work to the level of your understanding. I didn't understand what that meant. But she was talking about mind-body connection. She was talking about what is possible to do, the healing that can occur when you get in touch with that higher mind. And that was why she was studying every day to kind of understand that. And so later on, of course, I started to get it, but I didn't stay with the religion. I didn't keep practicing that. Then later on, I started moving into things that were still different, but they were more of a spiritual. I mean, I took a leap into science of mind. That was another study by Ernest Holmes. And then there were so many other things. And then on to later on, A Course in Miracles. So these were all things that were so different than traditional religions. And I responded to that differently for some reason, which I didn't understand at the time.
Yeah, I love Ernest Holmes. You know, one of my favorite quotes by Ernest Holmes is, we must find this God in each other and love this God, forgetting all else. And I love that.
Yes, exactly. Which is kind of I've been coming to understand, and part of really what my work is about as well.
You were a vocalist coach? A vocal coach?
That's
I heard
the other
that.
thing too. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I had done so many other different careers in my life. I was modeling. I was running businesses. I mean, all kinds of things very early on in my life. It was just, I was all over the place. From Chicago, and then I moved to New York, and then I moved to Los Angeles. But every place I was always doing something a little bit different. But then in 1988, I started doing vocal coaching. I always sang. I mean, I sang since I was a kid, but I never thought about being a coach myself. And I actually I wasn't even performing for years, and I gave it up when I was, I did a little bit in New York, but when I moved to California in 1982, I thought, well, let me try this again. Let me go back to it. And I was just doing small clubs and this, that, and the other. And then I went to a vocal coach I think by mistake, but nothing's by mistake. We just figure it out later. And I went to this vocal coach who was the guy. He was the biggest coach in this country, but he coached people all over the world. And he was brilliant. He coached every star you could think of. And so I thought, I can't go to this guy. I'm terrible. Why am I going to do this? And so, but I did. And I worked with him he pointed out things to me that I had never experienced before. And when I first went to him, and I'd been singing for a while, but he says to me after the first session, he goes, well, you've been singing with about 60% of your voice. I go, what? That didn't make sense to me. But then he showed me why. There were these constrictions. There were these physical things that were going on. It was crazy. And over time, that started changing everything. And then in 1988, he says, now you have to go and become a coach. I said, I can't do that. I'm going to ruin somebody. And he said, the best thing to me ever. He says, no, you won't. He goes, what I did is I took all my information from my coach in New York. I put my stamp on it, and that's what I teach now. He goes, and that's what you will do as well. And he says, anyone who comes to you, you're going to know more than they do. And over time, you're going to become better than I am. Made no sense to me, but he was absolutely correct. When I started, people came to me who had very little experience, and it kept growing. Then I started getting people who became really, the caliber of clients started to change. And then I had people who became stars, who became really famous over time. And, but I was, again, when I first started, I was terrified. But that thing that he said to me, you will become better than me one day, that's evolution. That's what we're all supposed to do, is take stuff from everybody else and figure it out, because we're always living in different times in our world. So we have to evolve. And that over time made sense to me. But again, I'd been so traumatized since I was a kid about singing in public or doing anything. The one thing I did when I first came to California, and I tell this story to my clients, I knew that I had to get over myself. And so I would go to clubs. I would drive miles away and go to karaoke bars so I could get up and sing, because I knew no one would be there to see me. No one that I knew would be there. And so it was easier, but I had to work out the nerves and that about just being seen, which is a wonderful thing that I use from Jim Carrey. He says, the problem with most people is they don't want to be seen. And that is, we don't want to be seen, especially as our authentic selves, because we have that built-in feeling of insignificance or not being enough, just like what I was expressing to my coach when he said, go do this. So, but that's where it all started. So I didn't, and my other part of my life didn't start until later, but I did that for, well, I still do it a bit. I just take private, people now, but so 35 years I was doing that. And then I became I opened an online business with a guy in Australia. He found me online. He wanted to do a business with me. So we did. We created an online program, and it started going all over the world. It became this global thing. And I thought, that's crazy, from something that I didn't think I could do in the beginning to now. And he told me at one point after we were doing this, wow, we've made $1 million from this one program that we were selling. I go, oh. And to this day, people keep telling me how much that work has changed their life, changed their voice, or whatever. But I'm saying that because I want people to understand, because especially entrepreneurs or people who are creating something new or whatever it is, we always have that fear, I don't know if this is going to happen. But when we take the steps, which is stepping into that unknown, it's amazing what can happen.
You mentioned you helped people that eventually became stars. Do you have any people you don't mind sharing with us that you helped?
Oh, I'll tell you. Yeah, I talk about them all the time. The first person who came, who she wasn't a star then, but the singer Brandy. She's an R&B singer, but when she first came to me, she was 12 years old. So we didn't know that she was going to turn out to be that. And her brother, Ray J, he came for some lessons, and they became very famous. Then at the same time, Macy Gray came to me. I don't know if you know who she is.
Yeah.
Okay. And then she was in college at the time that she first came to me. She was going to USC she was in the film school at USC. So something, you never know what's going to happen. Then I started getting, I call them the kids of all the famous people. I was coaching Marvin Gaye's daughter, Nona Gaye. I was coaching one of the Monkees kids.
The Monkees.
Forgetting their names now. I was getting them. Then I got Mel Torme, who was a famous jazz singer. I started coaching his son, James Torme, who was still performing to this day. And so it was like that. And I had done before it really started early on, I was doing a cable access show, a local cable access show called Singing with Roger Burnley. And people started finding that or seeing that. This was back in the day where I don't think people watch, see cable public access TV anymore. I know it's still there, but that's not a big deal. But back then, when you turned on your TV, when we had cable, and when you turned on your TV, the first thing you would see was the cable station, and so it would be public access. And so a lot of people would see it before they changed channels, but a lot of people would see that, and I started getting clients from that, and that's where it started to grow a little bit more.
I heard you talk about you suffered a lot in life. You've been through a lot. And you also said, I've heard you share, and you wrote that nothing happens by accident.
Right.
Would you like to expand on that?
Well, I can follow, and I've done this, and this is the work I do with everyone now, because I can go back and look at my life and all the things that had happened that were terrible, that were traumatic, there were all of that. But because I moved through them, then I gained some wisdom and knowledge that I could give to others. Again, this whole process of evolution. I'll start with the first thing, because this is all in the book. When I was 12 years old, we moved to a new neighborhood. That was traumatic in itself, because it was a complete change of life for me, and racially and everything, because where I lived before was mainly a black neighborhood. There had been some other whites, but they had all gone. And so then we moved to a new neighborhood when I was 12, and this was all white and mainly Jewish, and I was this out of place kid, and so, but I started becoming accepted, which was really kind of fascinating to me. But then we joined the Boy Scouts, and my older brother was 2 years older. We both joined the Boy Scouts, and we went on a camping trip. And this was in the winter, and this is in Chicago, but it was outside of Chicago. This a forest that we went to for the camping trip, and there was a river there. And they told us, don't go on the river. It looks like it's frozen, but it might not be. We were kids. we wanted to go. And so we all walked out on the river. I fell through the ice. I didn't know how to swim. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. And because I'm under there looking up, and people couldn't get me out, because when they were trying to get me out, the ice kept breaking off. And it took forever for them to figure out how they could anchor themselves, tie a rope to different people to anchor so they could finally pull me out. I get out, I'm with these heavy winter clothes and boots and all that, and I'm wet and I'm freaked. I couldn't go near water after that. It traumatized me. That trauma stayed with me forever, even to the point when I was in high school, I couldn't go to the swimming pool. We had part of our class, athletic class, was to have swimming. I couldn't do that. And I flunked my gym class because of that, because I couldn't get over that one thing that had happened. And so I could see beyond that, the fear just kept holding me back in different areas throughout my life. And I could connect it back to those early trauma that I had had. And most people can pinpoint certain places of trauma. We all kind of have it in different ways. And so it took a long time for me to move through that. That's why I wrote the book, because I knew that I had moved through so many horrible things, and in physical things too. I had many illnesses, diseases, hospitalizations, everything. But I kept moving through it, and I was obviously utilizing what my grandmother was doing that I couldn't do earlier in my life, but now I'm beginning to understand it. And the funny thing about that is that what I finally came up to, and not everyone's going to get this, but I could look at every physical thing that was going on with me, and the underlying cause was me disowning who I was. Me just not owning my authentic self. And somehow the universe just speaks up and says, hey, you're going to have a little bit of dis-ease because you're not owning you, which is why that's my work now, is getting people to understand that and owning who they are, loving who they are. And that can be a challenge.
Yeah, thank you. I love, that's one of my favorite topics is trauma. Because I think, I don't think we walk out of here without any trauma.
Exactly.
In my opinion. What did you notice about trauma? Like, what does trauma mean to you, and how did that affect you as a person?
It was gradual. That's the thing that it's so funny you should say that, because I just posted something today. I said, you rise in consciousness gradually, over time. That's what starts to happen. And it was a day-by-day process of me looking at things in an entirely new way. When we start understanding our neuroscience, how our brains work, and that the trauma gets implanted. So if I go back to, I'm 12 years old, I'm afraid of everything. And so now I'm going to look at everything else that shows up in my life and be afraid of that as well, because it becomes a mental pattern. I have created a neural pathway that is telling me I should be afraid all the time. And that's what I was moving through. And it took a long time for me to understand that. But when I started doing my automatic writing in 1988, that's when the information started coming through. That's when I could start to get all of this, which took years to put it all together.
Yeah, speaking
and trauma
about
to me means, to answer your other question, what does trauma mean? It means this: when we have something that tells us, we have an experience that tells us we're not enough, that we shouldn't be here, that something's wrong with us. And it just shows up in each of us in different ways. But I use this thing, we are all born broken. When we can understand that, and that our life is about remembering our worth and how valuable we are, no matter what we've experienced. And that's been the thing that I'm just so driven now to get more people to come to accept and understand.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of times in science now, they're saying not everyone that has trauma becomes an addict, but everyone that is an addict has some form of trauma. And when we truly understand that, we can may be able to have a better understanding and compassion for people that are out there. Because a lot of times I know people, being a human being, we pass right through people that were suffering from addiction and are homeless, and we label them as losers, But if you could really look deeper and understand they came from trauma and try to, have understanding, I think it does become love's other name.
Yes. And for you, because I got some things for you too, because I read a little bit of your story, so I know a little bit about what you went through and experienced. And when you started awakening, because that's what we all do, and then sometimes what happens when we start to become aware of certain things and it doesn't feel like we should do that, then we can go to addictions. Because, see, the addictions will block that consciousness. Addictions will block what's coming through. And I did that forever in so many different ways till I figured out, I'm just trying to not be with me. I'm hiding from who I am. And so not all, and I also wrote something else, and that, certain addictions might be fun for us if they're giving us pleasure. We might, if you're doing something that's fun, maybe I'm addicted. For instance, I'm addicted to this game that I play, this card game that I play online. For years, I'm just addicted to it. But then I also figured that, wait a minute, what it's doing is getting my brain to operate more. So that's a good addiction. It's getting me to think and figure things out. And the more we exercise our brains, the more we'll have access to stuff. So,
yeah, appreciate that. You became a channeler. Is that what we would call what happened?
Yeah. I was forced to become a channeler. Let me tell you that. I'm a very introverted person. That was the other part of my personality, which people don't understand. But that's really been who I've been my entire life. People look at me now and say, that doesn't make sense. Even my family, my brothers. I go, no, it's hard for me to get out in public and talk about certain things. Okay, I'll tell you why. In 1988, when I was making this big shift in my life, I was lost. And I just needed to find some information. I'd been meditating for a while, but I happened to read an article about automatic writing. Didn't know what that was. I'd seen channelers. I'd seen all of that before because I'd seen people doing that. I didn't think it was me. I didn't think I was going to do it. But when I heard about automatic writing, I said, let me try that. And the way it came about, and this gave me permission to do it, because I was reading an article in a business magazine where this guy who was starting his new business, he said he was having difficulty, but he started doing automatic writing. And he described what he did. He said, I would just meditate and sit with paper and just start writing stuff with what I would hear. And I said, okay, let me try that. And so I started doing it. I'm sitting down. I'm doing my meditation as usual. But this time I said, okay, let me have some paper here and sit at a desk where I can write if something comes through. For several days, nothing happened. Nothing came through. And then one day, something happened. And it was like I was hearing this very clear communication. And I started writing, and it felt as if my hand was being taken over. And these words were just coming out. And it was just, what the heck is going on here? But the fact was, it was giving me comfort. It was giving me understanding. I was accessing information that I didn't know. And then I was even writing words that I didn't understand. Where I could hear the word, but I have to go and look it up in the dictionary. What's that mean? This is what was coming through. But it was so strange that I didn't tell anyone. I told a few close friends because, I didn't know, but I didn't ever talk about it publicly. I did that for 20 years where I didn't want anyone to know what I was doing. And then in about it was 2008, someone found one of my writings on my desk in my office at the time, and they read it and said, wow, this is really great, and it helps me. Where did it come from? I'm feeling embarrassed at this time because I was keeping this secret. You're reading this? And I said, yeah, it came through me. And I said, I do it every day. And then they said, oh, this is great. Can you send them to me? I said, sure. So I started a little email group on my AOL at the time. That's how long ago this was. So I was like, that's all I had. And so I said, fine. So I created a little group mail, and I would write them every day because it's what I did, and I would send them to those folks. I never wanted to go public with it. Then about a year later, someone else said, "You need to have a website." I go, "No, you need to put these up online." So I finally agreed, and then I started a site called Any Advice for Today. The reason that it's that name, I want people to understand this. When I first started receiving this information, I was asking very specific questions about what I wanted to know, some problem, some difficulty. And then at some point I thought, oh, I'm controlling things again. And so I was like, I said, maybe there's something I should know that I don't have access to, which is true for all of us. And so I just started writing then, okay, let me get out of the way. And I started writing Any Advice for Today. I said, universe, just please tell me something. And that changed everything because now information really started coming through. And then people started responding to them. And then I thought, okay, well, I've got to do a little bit more. But still, I'm still doing my business. I'm so busy with my vocal coaching business that I don't want to make this public. I don't want to create anything with it. But I knew the world was changing, and then I knew I had to because I started receiving different information. Starting in about 2016, things started to change in what I was receiving. And then I started to get maybe this is going to help more people, which is what finally got me to write the book. Now, let me tell you, I knew I was supposed to write the book. I want everyone to get this, but I couldn't get it done because I say this in the preface of the book. Yeah, I wanted to write it for a long time, but there was one thing that was holding me back. That was fear. Which was crazy because it was the fear of what people were going to think. Because I knew for this book to make any sense, I had to be completely honest about how it came about. Because what I have in there is what I would receive when I would sit and meditate, and it was always giving me some kind of advice at how to get over this particular fear or whatever was going on for me. And it was always about me fearing myself, basically. But each way it gave me something different. And all the things that I was moving through in my life, I could see how this was helping me. I got to the place where I could not leave my house unless I sat down and did a meditation and wrote something, because I knew that made a difference in my life.
I think that's funny, and I love that what was holding you back is fear, and that's what you eventually named the book, Overcoming Fear.
Exactly. And again, it was fear of judgment. That was really the main thing, which I think most of us have. That's what stops us from getting out there, because we're all going to be different. But I was doing something that was so different. I said, I can't let people see this or know about it. But then when I started seeing people were really getting some help, some understanding from reading the book, I started to get over it.
I think David Icke and Lao Tzu, the Chinese mystic, both said, if you're always worried about what other people think about you, you always be their prisoner. And that's hard. It's hard. I mean, I know it's hard for me at times, but eventually, little by little, I could care less in a healthy way, if that makes sense, of what people think about me.
You said the right thing, little by little. That's the thing that we got to understand, because sometimes we want to get over it right away. But see, what you did, it was like you said, little by little each day, and everything that you started doing helped you to move beyond it. And so when we can understand that it is this cognitive process that we all have to move through, and it's different for each person because we have different life paths, but it's still basically the same thing.
So did you lose friends or stop talking to family members, or do they think you're weird because of what was going on?
Yeah.
What happened?
There were certain friends that just couldn't understand anything that I was doing. And so we didn't speak. And that was probably the biggest challenge. And I was, and some family members because they just thought this is weird. I have one family member who says they're an atheist or something. So there's nothing that exists outside of right here, not what we're seeing. I'm thinking, okay, fine. And so nothing that I was doing made any sense to them. And then because of the way that it all came about, it was difficult for me to talk about it. And so I sat down and one day I was just receiving information, and I received this one message that said, "You needed the opposition." I go, what? What does that mean? It said, yeah. It said, well, you don't need anything. None of you need anything. But when you have people pushing against you or not believing in yourself or not believing in you, then guess what? You have to do it. And then you start to accept who you are. So I can look at all those folks now and say, oh, yeah, you helped me. Anybody who didn't believe in me before, you helped me kind of believe in myself. And we would just have people in our lives who are, we can see it probably when we are growing up. We can think, with our parents even. We're different than they are, and they don't believe in us or whatever it is. But we carry that on throughout our adult lives unless we start to become aware that we are the ones stopping ourselves by not being honest with who we're becoming or becoming our authentic selves.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's the greatest minority in today's world. It's not being Mexican, Black, or Polynesian, and so on. Those ain't the minorities. The real minority in today's world is authenticity.
Right.
Because we live in a world that wants you to be who they want you to be, and a lot of us get robbed, especially with trauma. It's like it creates the loss of self, and we get lost in all these different types of egoic identities for defense mechanisms. And for the longest, I was always easily influenced by my environment versus really tapping into my true self. So I appreciate you talking about that stuff.
I'm glad you mentioned the egoic thing, because I received something so different, a different kind of definition or understanding of the ego. And this was so crazy when it started coming through, was that the ego is this false self that you've created. And so the ego thinks that it's going to keep you safe. When you start to operate in a different way, when you start to move outside of your known place of being, then the ego says, no, you can't do that. You're going to fail. You're going to mess up. No, stay here. Don't do that. This is safe. This is what you know. And so that's how I think of it. It's that thing that's telling us that we can't move out of what we've known, or something terrible will happen to us, or whatever it might be. And when I look at it that way, and then with the fear too, I want to talk about that. I started having to make a different definition or understanding of fear, because I said the ego is just keeping me in fear. And so then when I look at what is that? Well, the fear could be that if I'm going to do something that's going to hurt me, that's going to cause me, to kill myself or hurt someone else, maybe that's a warning I need to pay attention to. Maybe that is something that is worth me being a little afraid, or at least having some caution. But then I said, well, everything else is just me being afraid of me, just me being afraid of taking that next step, or as you said, going into the unknown. That's what really happens. And we all have that. I use this one thing. I have a lot of my clients look at this too, because it's so brilliant. Will Smith did a video on skydiving. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Mm-mm. However, I advise everyone to see it. It's one of the best things ever. It's best. It's great because he's funny as he's telling the story, of course, but the way he delivers it is so revealing, because he really describes how he had agreed to go on this skydiving trip, trip with a bunch of friends. They were in Dubai, and they were going to do this skydiving. And so then after he made the commitment, he goes, well, why did I do that? He says, this is just really stupid. Why am I going to jump on full plane? And then I want everybody to watch it. It was the best thing. And then he said, maybe everybody else will cop out. Maybe everybody else won't show up and I won't have to do it. This is what he's thinking. And then he goes through this whole thing of talking about it. And then when he finally jumped, he goes, why was I afraid? He said it was the most exhilarating thing ever. And that's what a lot of us do. We are afraid to jump, and then once we do, we figure, oh, this is okay. I'm floating. I mean, just imagine I'm just kind of flying and floating. And anyway, I should probably get royalties on that video because I've talked about it so much.
Yeah, and we get growth from that, right? Walking through our fears.
Yeah.
You mentioned one of the acronyms you mentioned in your book, which is famous in the 12-step community, is false evidence appearing real. And I love that.
My mother used to say that. I said, that's not real. I said, it's not false evidence. I'm looking at it. I'm seeing the thing I'm afraid of. That's not false. But I began to understand it after or certain, because that's that same thing. That probably describes the skydiving thing so well. That was the false evidence. I think if I'm going to jump out of this plane, that something horrible is going to happen, only to find out that it's really a wonderful ride. And I feel great while I'm doing it. So, that's what it is.
Yeah, and for me, I think a lot of it, with those thoughts, those negative thoughts of fear, it also creates those emotions that make it feel real. And I love that. So I appreciate you writing that.
But I'm so glad you said that about the emotions. I wrote this, and this one took me forever to figure out. I'm so glad you said that. I have this hanging on my wall, actually. It goes, your emotions are not an end of themselves. They are designed to lead you to your beliefs. Your beliefs may or may not be based in truth. The what? So when I'm feeling some sort of horrible emotion, that means that's not the truth of who I am. And I have got to figure that out. I've got, that's what, and so then, but then the other thing that happens that would come through, sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel our emotions, because that could be a mental program as well. If I'm going to feel sad, if I'm going to feel this, whatever it might be, it's a bad thing, except we're given them for a reason so that we can transmute them. So if the ones that don't feel good to us, we're supposed to be in joy. We're supposed to be in happiness. And so, but the other emotions that come up, if we give them full expression, follow them through, then we figure out a lot. I got to tell you this one, so I'm so glad you brought that up. I was going to a therapist. This was many years ago, a counselor. And after a long time, we're talking, and she says to me, I think you might have some anger issues. I said, that's not possible. I'm the nicest person in the world. I could not have anger issues. But I could feel that I did, because I was holding things back. And I go, why am I doing that? And it took me back to a memory when I was a kid, where I was being teased all the time. And this is my family, my cousins. And I was being teased. And then one day I lost it. I thought, I hate this. And I grabbed my cousin, and I was going to beat him up, and I'm banging his head against a tree, because the rage that came out of me, because it had been going on for so long, it was bottled up. And so because of that, when I said, okay, I can never do that again. So I started to try to control any anger that might come up. And sometimes anger, it doesn't have to be bad if we don't act on it. Anger could just be an alert to we are not taking care of ourselves. We're not owning that could be what it is. We don't have to act on it, but to allow ourselves to feel it, we know that we're cutting off some parts of ourselves. That's all. And so, that was been a really interesting journey. And I have people go through and we examine all those emotions, because none of them are bad. We just got to figure out why we're having them.
Yeah, I was driven by a lot of different forms of anger, different forms of fear, and anger was one of them. Especially when I would drink, that anger would amplify.
Yes,
I remember in 10th grade, I smashed a kid's head in the water faucet and split it open, and blood all over my Cypress Hill shirt, and police chasing me. He was another gang member. So I used to play. I used to like going at it with gang members. It was like a sport, like some guys like to go play basketball, but but it got me out of me, because I was so disconnected with myself, and I needed to get out of me. And doing those kind of things made me forget who made me kind of like taking a drink. It gets me out of me. I escape for a brief moment. But I come to realize anger is a form of fear.
You should, get you out of be. There's another information that would come through. I would receive this message all the time that stop running from yourself, and that's what a lot of us do because we don't want to look inside. This is I just was reading a little bit of this too. Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, philosopher. I call him. I think to me he's a great philosopher. He was, and so he says the main people don't want to look inside because he's the one who started talking about shadow work, and that's understanding that we all have, like you said, this trauma. And sometimes we don't know where it came from. It could have come from another life, some other existence. But usually it's something that's just within us that we've got to figure out why is it there, and then start to and decide to move through it.
Yeah, Carl Jung once said, "Those who look outside dreams; those who look inside awakes." And that's what I eventually found through the 12 steps. I learned how to look within myself. And I love that another acronym for fear you might have heard of is F everything and run, which was the pattern of my life, or face everything and rise in what? Rise in consciousness.
Yes, exactly. And I'm so glad you said that's the thing I just put out today about rising consciousness, that it happens over time. And we've got to be the ones to do it,
Yeah, interesting. So going back to your channeling, who are you channeling? I know you have a name, and I don't want to screw up the name. Is it a person or persons? Wilhelm?
Okay, now, and this is the weirdest thing ever, and I could never have explained this because when in the first day that something came through, it frightened me because it was so odd. I was hearing something, and I go, "Who's speaking to me?" That's what I was saying. And then I heard, well, this is another part of you. It's your higher self, another aspect of you. But if that makes you uncomfortable, you can call us whatever you like. This is really what I heard. And I said, and the name Wilhelm came out of my mouth. I have no idea at the time. I had no idea why I would say that name. And then I had a very specific spelling for it. Some people spell it with 2 L's, no. And I kept hearing, nope, it's supposed to be 1 L. I didn't know why that came out until years later. And then when I started to understand we are all connected eternally, and we will have things that come out from our memories that we won't understand, but it is part of what I call our divine plan. Everybody has a blueprint. Everybody has a divine plan. So when I started doing this, it wasn't that I was, what became clear later, I was connected to different sorts of angelic beings, let's say, or I don't think of it as a particular one because it was just this universal consciousness, which we all have. It's this cosmic universal consciousness, higher state of awareness, higher state of being. And so I wasn't connected to anything else. And that question was asked during one of the channeling sessions. Now, I didn't start channeling live until 2021. Because I was never going to do that. I was never going to try to live. There were times where I would be, one time I can think of, I would get all this information. I said, okay, I've got to remember it. So I'd pick up my phone and I would channel into the phone and just remember what that was. That was it. But I wasn't letting anybody hear that. But then in 2020, I knew the world was changing because my messages started changing. I started receiving messages saying our world was going to be different and that we would be moving through a restructuring. I had no idea what that meant. But then I kept receiving all of this information, and then I started seeing it happen in the world. They said, we're moving through an evolutionary change that none of us have experienced. And we're going to have conflict. We may have wars. We may bring in leaders like a Hitler. I'm getting all this stuff. I'm going, this is weird. But then I started seeing it. And then in 2021, I'm here very clearly. You have to start talking. We have too much to say. I go, what? I didn't want to do that. But I said I got to. So I started doing live channeling sessions. And what was so crazy about that, I was accessing new information now. I was always doing when I was writing it. When I was speaking it, it was weird how much to me. It was weird how much was coming through. And then if anybody sees any of my channeling sessions, they will see this, because when I'm receiving this information, I'm in a different place. And then when I come back into the room, when I'm done transmitting, I have no idea what I've said. I maybe have a little bit of bleed through of something, but I have to go back and listen to it. And that just happened the other day. I went back. I had forgotten this. There was a session that I did in November of 2021 that I had not seen, that I hadn't listened to. Nobody had seen it. I had uploaded it online, but I didn't really share it. And I listened to it the other day, and I go, oh, my God. It was saying everything that's happening in our world right now. But when we understand time is this time isn't real either. We have different dimensions and we can access that. And more of us who access higher states of awareness, we start to see a very different life and world. And that's when I started receiving the information about the restructuring of the world in 2020. I go, this is frightening. And that's how it felt to me. And they said the United States would be going through it. The United States would lead the way in this restructuring. All of it didn't make sense. But then I started seeing it, and we have it right now. We have all these political divisions and anger and splitting apart. And other people are calling it the big shift. Other people are saying, there's so many different words for what is happening. But then I started to understand it from a scientific standpoint as well. We're all energy. And the United States was formed at a time where the planet Pluto was moving, and that planet takes 248 years to change. And we were coming into that change right around from 1776 to where we were, 2020, 2020. I go, oh, that's what's going on. That's why everything looks crazy. But the point of it was, what I started receiving was, we are trying to make a better world. But we can't do that unless we get rid of what was old and what didn't work. And that means is within each of us, these limiting ideas, limiting beliefs, all of that, and hatred and anger and bigotry and stuff that we could have carried into this world from our relatives, our parents, our ancestors, whatever. But we must let go of that. And that's what this period is. And then, so I hear very clearly, oh, we gave you everything you needed to know in 2012. Again, the most insane thing ever. But then I heard this when I'm on a walk. And then I come back into my home and I just go to my computer, and I opened a folder that I hadn't paid attention to I didn't even know it was there. And it said Wilhelm on it. And I opened it up, and the messages were from 2012. And I said, we gave you a philosophy, and it's called your life operating instructions. I go, what? But yes, you're going into a new world. And so you've been through everything, so you can help others get through this transition, because it's always a transition in our consciousness, And, but I didn't trust that either. But in 2021, I said, I got to try it. And I created something and gave it to other people, and I could see they were transforming. I go, oh, this is good. This is what we all need. When we can move through, because I had to do it. I got to tell you this, which didn't make sense, because I knew what was coming. And so in about 2016, when I started to change, I was talking about racism and misogyny. And I wrote an article, people go, you're a little nuts. But the article said, I might be slightly racist with misogynistic tendencies. And people go, why are you writing that? I said, because it's true for all of us. I had to look at what might be in my DNA that was old, that my parents might have given me, that others, the elders, might have been passing on to me that no longer serves, And if I'm carrying around any form of racism, then I'm not helping. And if I'm carrying around misogyny, which is what's been going on for women for so long, I'm not helping the cause of creating a better world of equality, of inclusion, of acceptance. And that's what the work that I'm doing now.
Speaking of Wilhelm, am I saying it right?
Yeah, well,
Would
yeah.
we will we be able to ask them a question? Ask them a
Oh,
question.
sure. Yeah.
What must we do to create change for the better? With looking in with a world right now full of chaos, war, racism, discrimination, and hatred.
But we tell you and you don't believe it because we told you, we've given you the answers. We told you all you have to do is love yourself. That's all you've got to do. And if more of you would do that, the greater the majority of you would do that, you'd have a very different world. Because if you go inside and figure out all of those areas within you where you've been denying who you are, where you haven't been loving yourself, where you've been carrying around old energies that are not yours, then you can't hope to see your world do anything differently. So it has to begin with each person. And what we have given you through all of this time is the information to change your mind. If you develop everything in your consciousness, but you have things that are old. And you have to be able to look inside. And this is the most difficult thing that most humans have. And we have given you information from well before any of you can remember that could help you move through this period, this transition in your world, which we call your restructuring. And that's what you are all moving through now.
Yeah, can I ask another question? What is
Yeah.
God?
God is all that is. Now, you each will, this is the thing that we will give you. You each will use different words, different terminologies. And the work that we wanted to bring through, and we don't use that. Our messenger has not used that word so much because what we wanted to do is bring in information where you each could accept your individual ideas of God or Allah or all that is or whatever term you might use. Because see, when you all understand that you come from different places, you have different DNAs, you bring in different information, and you all have different beliefs. And when you understand they're all okay if they're taking you to a higher state of understanding. But what has happened over centuries, over eons, is that you've used things, those terminologies and religions have done it, where you cause separation, where you make one better or worse than the other, and no human, that does not exist. You're all equal. You come in with the equal qualities and abilities. You just express them differently. And so the more that you can understand that your beliefs, your ideas about what you believe a God would be is the one that is best for your evolutionary journey, and then you give that permission to all others, you have a very different world.
One last question. Are there other beings, and who's controlling our world today?
You are. And when we say you, we mean the collective you. And this is the thing that we wanted you to understand. You create your world and your lives individually through energy, your consciousness and energy. And as we've actually posted something today, consciousness rises over time. So if you look at your world, you'll see many, many beings who have not chosen to rise their consciousness in this particular lifetime. But they also give you an opportunity to choose to raise yours because now you have contrast. We've also said that you have contrast and conflict in your world. They always exist in human existence because then you get an opportunity to choose. But you can't judge those who you feel is being somewhat different than you, or they not or are not awakened. You're just supposed to awaken yourself so that you can be the example for them. And the more of you who do that, then you start to see a very different world. Now, we said that this isn't going to happen overnight, but the more of you who begin now, you'll start to see something very soon that'll be different. And we want to give you this because many of you will move through this next year, 2024, and it's going to be a little traumatic, let's say, because there's going to be many things that you're still moving through. And if you connect this to your astrology, your astronomy, and the planets and the energetic changes of that, it makes more sense. However, you're going to have a little bit of fear, and this is why we've given our messenger something to help more of you move through your fear and doubt. And the more of you who do that, you start to feel something so completely different in yourself, and then you start to look at others in entirely new ways. We know that we're speaking of this utopia in existence, but if more of you believed in that, you could create it.
One last question before we go. What's the purpose of life?
Expansion. Becoming more. Now, we'll give you something that will be difficult for many of your viewers to understand, but you're eternal spiritual beings, and you chose lifetimes. You're in this incarnation, this particular lifetime, to expand and evolve. Your individual way will be different. You have memories from past lifetimes. Many of you might have that, or they may be appearing now. However, in each lifetime, you're meant to evolve more, meaning moving closer to the light, as we call it. That's ascension. You thought of it in certain beings or ascended masters or certain people who have ascended, but you all do that. And then when you put that together collectively, you have a planet that will ascend. And you're in this period now where globally that has not taken over, which is why we've been given our work to get more people to understand that if you each come together and collectively decide you raise your individual consciousness and then bring that together collectively, you're creating a boomerang of energy, so to speak, that will uplift your world. And you all can do it when you believe that you can.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wow.
Okay.
How do you feel?
Good. Did that help? What it came through?
Yeah, it did. Thank you. I'm going to have to re-listen to that. I appreciate that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I always do as well. So that's what happens.
So we're getting close to the end, but one more quick question for you. What's the difference between religion and spirituality to you?
Religion, to me, religion has rules. And that's been the problem. And see, religion's been created over time, different, groups of people or ethnicities or country, whatever. It's just been created over time. But each one had certain rules. You have to do this. You have to do that. And then otherwise you're going to go to hell. Something's going to happen. They're all different. But when we can understand that rules, at certain times, in society, we need rules so we have a workable society. But when we start putting them into our thinking, that becomes a problem because then we can't create anything new. And like I say, the thing that came through so much during all the information I've been receiving that's part of this change that's happening in this time in our world, that we have to move beyond that old constricted traditional religion and open up to more expansion in our intelligence and allow each person to find their own way, basically. But a lot of times religions will give you certain rules, and that if you can't do this, then you're a bad person.
Yeah, you're right. I kind of don't believe religion's really helping much anymore. And you could disagree with that, but the Bible says, by their fruit ye shall know. And it's been over 2,000 years and hasn't done too much.
Yes,
but every
exactly.
so often there's a beautiful being individual that comes out of religion, like Miser Eckhart or, Thomas Merton.
Yes.
And Martin Luther King and so
yes.
on. So
exactly. Yeah.
So your service as being a life coach, how can we find you? What does that look like? Really quick. And
what I'm doing now, and this is the big vision that I have. Anybody can go to my website, and it's rogerburnley.com. That's where they can find everything there. But what I'm so passionate about now is this work that I put together, which I called the whole program is called your Last Development Program. But right now I have this one program that I'm using called 4 Weeks to Your Best Life. And it's just so great. And I want to have as many people do that because you transform once you go through it, because it gets you to look inside, and it's a thing that you do on your own. And we have group meetings and all of that, but it's work that you do on your own. I just saw something today. One of our members, he's been doing this for a while, and in there you have questions you have to answer. He's writing textbooks. I go, how is that happening? He's writing so much brilliant stuff. But that is what I'm working on now. So that's the thing that I want more people in. And I decided that I'm making it an easy entry. Anybody can afford to do it. It's not, that's the thing that I want to do. I thought I want to get this information to as many people as possible, because I have this whole crazy idea of healing the world, So I'm trying to get it to as many folks as I can.
I appreciate your work, and I'll be putting your book up in my links for anybody that's interested. And
Great.
One of the most beautiful things I got out of your reading right now is we have the power to create change as individuals and at a collective level. And thinking about it, one collective thought can change the world.
Yes.
The more we have collective patterns that raise our vibration for the greater good, we have the power to create change. So if we don't like it, we get to be the change we wish to see in the world.
You mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. just a while ago, and I don't know how many people know this because I just discovered this history a while ago. That was not his name when he was born. I don't know if you knew that. He was born. He was born Michael. First of all, that was his father's name. But then what happened was his father was traveling the world, and he started to see things that weren't quite right, and so he changed his name. He wanted his son to be a Martin Luther, so he changed the name to Martin Luther after Martin Luther, the reformer, because he said we need to change something different, and so that's how his name came about. We can take information and ideas and beliefs that from before and bring them into the world now. And like you said, one man who made that much of a difference because his father had the foresight to give him a new idea to bring into the world.
Through the power of individuality, right? And the expansion of consciousness. So thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for coming on. Great.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun. In ancient India, they say namaste. But Snoop Dogg says namastizzle, so namastizzle.
Oh, that's perfect.
Have a good one, Roger. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.